Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Game Time Discussions. I'm Cameron Selby, sitting here with Emery Cuzzy, and we are going to tag team the tackle class for this 2020, oh my goodness, 2025 draft class. It's a whole lot of interesting stuff going on because there's a lot of positional flexibility with these guys, a lot of uncertainty of just if they're going to stay there, if they're going to kick inside, and especially the top prospects at least. So it's a whole lot of interesting names, and that could really kind of jumble this group up once we get down to the draft because of the fact that people could value guys in other areas or they want somebody as a mainstay at that position. But it's a whole lot of fun to talk about. It's actually one of the first classes that Emery did scout and break down, so he's kind of had to do some refreshers on his memory of why he ranks these guys the way they do.
Yeah, so kind of my process is of course, I do the scouting and I finish all that, but then like right before these videos the night before, I'll rewatch all their highlights and stuff just to kind of like be like, oh yeah, he does that well, he does that well, and that's why I wrote that down because I talk off a sheet. There's a sheet here, I promise. Yeah, we have some guys though, like Cam said, that you'll actually. When I get into this video, I know there's going to be people that are going to, come back and start talking mess because you're going to be like, "Oh, I can't believe that guy's that low or that this or that." Well, it's because I actually see them as interior offensive linemen over offensive tackles. So they're lower on our list because I actually have them on the interior offensive line list that'll be coming out. So if are you going to watch this video? You'll have to go watch that other video to see who we're talking about. But if you would please, because we don't do this enough, please like, comment, and subscribe on this video. Tell us about these guys and stuff like that when we get to them and as we go through it. We really appreciate y'all's interaction and stuff, of course. But let's get to it.
Let's do it. So yeah, we're gonna kick it off with some honorable mentions. Johnny Cornelius.
Mhm.
Hoping I'm not butchering that, but out of Oregon, Holland Pierce out of the Rutgers, Chase Lunt out of UConn, and Emory Jones, quite the faller out of LSU. He's one of two tackles for LSU we will talk about on this video.
Yeah, this group right here is actually pretty solid. There were some guys that I was actually like, oh, maybe this guy could be a lot higher, and then I started watching more film, and I was like, oh, they're gonna fall, but they're not. It's not that they're bad players. Some of them have solid upside. Emory Jones, like you said, a big faller. So we'll get into all these guys, but Johnny Cornelius is the right tackle for Oregon, so he's on the right side. That's not necessarily always the premier side, obviously. Everybody talks about left tackles. But he was a 4 year starter. He had 2,547 total snaps over the last 3 years, which is a ton. And the problem is, this was his worst statistical season of his career. So that taking a step back, being a little bit older as a prospect isn't always good to see, but I think he does really well in space. If you watched Oregon play this year, they're an outside zone team. They run the ball outside. They make their tackles move. They run a lot of screens. They make them go out and find cornerbacks and safeties to block. So to do that stuff, you have to be able to move, and I think he moves pretty well. He's good against twists and stunts. I actually really like the ceiling of a Johnny Cornelius. I just don't know that he has the floor, and so I think that that's probably one of the things that really kind of turned me off to him. But his size and power in the run game actually, I think, will translate really well. He has a really good anchor and pass pro, and he's when we talk about offensive linemen, this video or the interior offensive lineman video, finishing is a box you have to check, in my personal opinion, because you have to be willing to go get after it in the run game as much as possible. So big issue is his overall bend and flexibility in his hips. He stands too tall, and it makes him susceptible to pulls and makes him off balance. So push pull type of techniques, getting him off balance is actually a lot easier than you want it to be. Stalemates defenders a little bit too often and stops his feet. So when you hit people, you don't want to stop. You want to keep going and pushing through them. I think that he does a bad job of that at times, and lets them fall off. He falls off of them at times. Um, Technical athletic pass rusher will give him issues. So good hands, things like that, spin moves. Like technical athletes will beat him at times, and because he oversets against speed at times, and that just kind of gives away certain things. And then power doesn't always show up in the pass game. I think it's good in the run game. I think it lacks in the pass game. I don't think he has that punch that you want to see all the time. But I also think Oregon didn't really run the ball his direction. Like if you watch film on it, Like you'll be watching a game and you're like, I'm waiting for them to run the ball to the right side of the field. And they really didn't. They tried to run to the other side of the field. There's another tackle in this class from Oregon that we'll talk about in a little bit. They ran to the left side of the field way more than they ran to the right side, and I thought that was really telling of what they thought about, possible issues that Ajani kind of showed. Holland Pierce is a mountain. He's literally the biggest person you might have ever seen. He he's huge. He had a great Shrine Bowl in one-on-ones, so I thought that was really impressive because I think he had some issues with quarterback pressure rates. 4.4% quarterback pressure rate. He had a really high run grade at 83 and a half. But I just think the same problems you think of when you have a mountain of a man are the same things you get. He's a waist bender, so he leans in the run game and can really be off balance. He's an off balance type of player. I need him, to bend a little bit more at the knees type of thing. He's a slow first step. You're that big, it's hard to move, I guess. Head down when striking. I mean, he's just taller, so that makes sense. He has the flexibility issues. He has some athleticism issues. He's not the greatest athlete in the world. And then also, he's got foot speed issues. He might have 25 sized feet, like feet. His feet might be size 25. I mean, they just don't move as fast as other people, and
Hmm.
that really shows up on tape. But his leg length is really good. So almost like Joe Alt we talked about last year, they both set really, really deep with their legs, and it's really hard to get around the edge on them because of the fact that they're just so long. He's a good anchor for pass rushers and power rushers. Really solid in the run blocking at the point of attack. He's got that power and strength with that lean that he does. Especially when it's not in space, he can just like get to you right now. So I think that that's what he's mostly good at, and I think he has upside if he can kind of become more technical as a player and kind of like iron out some of those issues of like flexibility and stuff and just really work on that stuff. I think he could be a really good player. He has the size and the strength and stuff like that already in place. It's just the issue of I can't use it if I'm never on balance.
Mhm.
And then Chase Lunt, he's the left tackle out of UConn. He's 1.3% quarterback pressure rate was awesome. Gave up 0 sacks this year. He's a 3-year starter at right tackle, 2,371 snaps. That's really cool to see. He's good in space. He's got awesome length, of course. Sorry, the sizes aren't on there. He's huge also. Very, very tall human. He could not move to guard if that was a question prior. He probably fits an outside zone style of team because he's a good athletics mover for his actual size. And I think he fits the NFL prototype. So I thought that I actually like think his pros already push him into NFL style body and things like that. But he has some cons. He's really skinny for his height. If you look at him like you're like, wow, that like you can tell sizes on people. He doesn't have that like massive butt that you like to see when you're like talking about like how can a pass blocker anchor. He doesn't have that. He doesn't hold much power, so he doesn't really have that explosiveness and stuff like that. So that's really his biggest issue. So he's probably most fit for outside zone teams because of that. Also, is because he doesn't have the ability to down block and just remove defensive linemen and move them out of the way. I think his technique in pass pro is just okay. I think that that's an issue, and then his size also makes him lunge and drop his head, which things that you just don't want to see because he'll just miss. He'll whiff. Next guy up, Emory Jones Jr. He was a top 5 tackle probably prior to the year, possibly even higher for some people. But he had a definite down year to say the least. He had 5.6% quarterback pressure rate per snap, 1 sack given up, but 31 hits and hurries. So he was really hurting back there for Garrett. But I think that has a little bit to do, and we'll talk about this with his teammate later on. But when you have a running quarterback in Jaden Daniels going to Garrett Nussmeier the next year, it's a very big difference. So I think that that is a little bit more difficult, and it really shows who's a really good pass blocker and who's not. He had the most hurries of any of the people on this list at 26, But he is a nasty finisher. He's a nasty guy. He can play with independent hands. So if you're talking about just like how you throw your hands while you're setting, so if you're pass setting, you throw one hand versus both hands all the time, and it keeps your shoulders in better position to play inside moves and stuff like that. So I think he does that good. I think he has really great upside, but it's all projection. It's not based on, anything other than he's done it a little bit last year, and also he has the body type to do it. He's good in drive blocks and doubles, so down blocks and doubling up to linebackers. And then I think his balance is solid. I mean, I'm sorry. I think his balance is terrible because he stands too tall. His stance is awful, and issues with power moves, which is part of that balance issue. His footwork, tight in stance, and loses power. Because I don't know what they're teaching him at LSU, but both of their tackles are really tight and stand up too tall. I don't know what it is. They just both do it. So I think that that's something. But these are the four guys that are on our honorable mentions list. Some of them have some serious upside. It's just, can you tap into it, basically?
Yeah, and it's kind of a mixed bag because you have Johnny Cornelius and Emory Jones who were fallers essentially based on where they were previously, and then Chase Lunt and Holland Pierce in smaller schools really kind of take off and to where they could really be late round sleepers. I know Chase Lunt anchored UConn, which they're not known for their football, but was one of the best in terms of as I believe a pass blocker.
Hmm.
He had the second lowest pressure rate of anybody other than our number one, which you'll have to tune in to see who our number one is. And then Emory Jones, it's even though he had a down year, there's no denying that he is a 3-year starter that he started every single game essentially since he was a true freshman. So a lot of a mixed bag of a lot of stuff, but there is potential on this list for sure.
Yeah. And then let's get into the actual tiers. So starting off, we're up tier five. And these two guys, and Anthony Belton and Cam Williams, kind of similar actually overall. Cam Williams, I told you about halfway through the year, I was like, oh, Cam Williams is legit. He could, do some real things in the draft, whatever. And then he has so many pressures or penalties. I'm sorry, 16 penalties on the year. It's his first year starting, and so I think that truly he had the most sacks on the whole list at five for the group, but he has some insane potential. His best option to me was going back to school,
Hmm.
and he just didn't do it. And I don't know why, but he just decided that was not what he wanted to do. If he would have gone back to school, I think he could have gone to the left side, stayed at right, whatever. But I think that it would have really helped his overall stock in this whole thing. But we'll just talk about some things. Length and proportion is amazing. Helps him, of course, helps him in pass pro. He's got the 34.5-inch arms. Um, locking on, grabbing a hold, and going for it. I mean, he has the 16 penalties, but when he doesn't get the penalty, it looks really good, and he can do it. He just needs to figure out when not to do that. He's got good foot drive, so he constantly moving his feet and stuff like that. Lateral quickness. I think he's actually an okay athlete in that way. But there are some cons. Hand placement, locking on, but having your hands outside, that's, it's just awful. It literally I wrote straight up awful. That is the worst, possibly one of his worst things. Is the hand placement. He's slow out of his stance. Speed rushers can get around him because of it. He's inexperienced, and we saw that. That's a real thing. We did get to see it. I mean, he does play for UT, and you get to watch them every week. Like, you notice it.
Hmm.
And then his balance can be an issue. Doesn't always stay on blocks. The other guy on the list, Anthony Belton, he actually really impressed post season, in the Senior Bowl and stuff like that. So I thought he looked good there. And then also, he only had 3 sacks on. He had 3 sacks on the year, but two of them came against Clemson. He had an 87.2 pass grade. Pass rush specialist. He has a jarring punch. He's got the arm length, which is really nice. Stops big edges and tracks. He's got a good anchor. He's athletic for his size, and he looks for work. So looking for work means if he doesn't have someone rushing on him, he's going to go find someone to like just help or plow to the ground or whatever he has to do because he doesn't just stand there and wait. Basically, is what I'm getting at.
Hmm.
Um, Athletic puller in the scheme and in his in gap scheme play. He's square in the open field, able to get to the second level defenders. I think he's more of an inside zone gap scheme fit than anything, but I think he's pretty nasty and looks for pancakes. Really good effort on run blocks. Some cons though. He he doesn't have the individual hands striking, and he really can like miss with both hands, get off balance, and then get run by. He's done that a couple times. And then the Clemson game, I'm gonna just say it's his mulligan game. Okay, everybody gets one. So, he gave up the 2 sacks and he got ejected. Like, let's just
Hmm.
say that's his mulligan game, okay? Because let's just take that one off. If he does that, you only have the 1 sack on the year. And that was a pretty tough one on him for sure.
Yeah, like you said, Cameron Williams, a lot of potential there, but just very raw. It's a 1 year deal, like you said. A lot of inconsistencies. Like you said, it could have done him justice. It's not like he's an older prospect. He's not going to be 22 before the season starts, but he really could have benefited from another year as a starter. And then Anthony Bolton, though, he has a lot of reps. He has over
Yeah.
2,200 snaps in college. He's a former JUCO guy that was unranked out of high school and really worked his way into things. He had 51 pancakes in 2023. I think that's pretty insane, and nine in one game for what it's worth. So he's just kind of a overlooked guy, but just an absolute mauler if you put him in the right scheme. So any kind of run heavy or stylistically thing that benefits his strengths is something that really is going to stand out. Athletically, he was the slowest in terms of all the 40s that were run, but at the end of the day, that's not really what he's known for. So a huge 40 could have helped vault him. It probably is going to make him a late rounder, but at the end of the day, he could be a very huge steal depending on where he goes.
Yeah, I think I like him a little bit more than probably consensus overall.
Mhm.
But I'm okay with that. I don't care what consensus thinks, but in
Right.
general, I like him a little bit more. One thing, can we get these schools to put the date of birth on them? Because it just says senior up there because I can't find the date of birth. Y'all can go look, y'all can put it in the comments. I'd really appreciate it. Trying to freaking figure this guy out. I'm actually going to go to the next page. Um, our number 7 guy is a graduate student, and our number 8 guy is a senior because for some reason the tackle position doesn't have the date of birth. So we're just gonna go with that. It is what it is, but graduate student means he's probably about 23. So that if that helps anybody. This is Ozzy Trapillo out of Boston College. I actually, Ozzy was one of the guys I watched, and I was like, dang, I really like this guy. Like, I was like, I don't know why more people aren't talking about him. And then I started looking at rankings and stuff, and I was like, oh, okay. A lot of people have him in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and I'm like, yeah, that's actually probably exactly where I have him. So maybe it's not that they're not talking about him. He's just not highly touted enough in the top 2 rounds to be like, this is a guy. But I really liked him. I think that his length is awesome. He's another guy that's, too tall to play guard, to say the least, at 6'8".
Hmm.
Um, Patience and pass pro. I really like to see his patience and pass pro. He's got short, quick feet, stays square, he allows to adjust to targets and run. So basically, he can wait and then hit, kind of thing. And then he's very athletic, capable of getting to the second level. I just think he does a lot of good things. He does have the tall man head down where he like tries to hit with his head down. And I think he has some issues with stunts and blitzes at times. Both of his sacks, actually, he has 2 sacks on the year. Both of them came off of blitzes. They didn't come off of true pass sets. So I thought that was good to see. His true pass set ability is actually really solid. And then Charles Grant out of William and Mary. Charles Grant was a first team FCS All American, and he basically was just so much better than his competition at the FCS level. So he is part of what I'm calling the all ceiling team because if he hits his ceiling, he's going to be legit. But the problem is he came out of an FCS school. I'm not sure necessarily if I think that he has the ability to hit that ceiling. And talent versus sometimes you watch film and you're like talent versus Charles Grant is so much less and there's no baseline. Like at least with we'll talk about Gray Zabel. We've talked about him a little bit. He actually played against an FBS team in Colorado. So I was like, oh, I can watch that game and really study that film and be like, this is what he did well.
Hmm.
Well, Charles Grant's a little bit harder. He didn't do that. Some things that he's good at. Well, he's athletic plus. Like he is the athleticism freak on this list. at one of the athletic freaks on this list. He has 34.75 inch arms, which is, really solid, higher percentile. He has good foot speed, bend, and flexibility are solid. And I think if he can add weight to his frame, because he's only 3'11", and I think if you watch him and look at him, he seems skinny. I think that'll really help him, especially at the NFL level. Um, his ceiling versus floor is just what really scares me, and that's why he's at 8 and not higher on this list, if that makes sense. Like I think people will fall in love with him. I've seen Daniel Jeremiah put him in his top 50 at points this year. I just don't know that I can get there because I think that there is a floor that is so much lower than a lot of these other prospects. So yeah.
Yeah, and with Charles Grant on top of that, he was the highest graded among this entire video in terms of run grade at 90.4, and he was a 3-year starter as an FCS player, just really absolute mauler. And on top of that, run game's good, but he allowed 2 sacks over his 3 seasons as a starting left tackle. So I
Mhm.
know it's FCS, but that's you know as good as you can get almost from that position. And Ozzy, like you said, grad student that's just kind of very good and just kind of gets the job done. Doesn't wow you, but he's right there and is able to contribute in multiple ways.
Yeah, if I actually had to talk about like which side of it I'm more excited about with Charles Grant, I'm actually more excited about his pass blocking ability than his run blocking ability, just because I think he lacks a lot of strength when it comes to the run blocking, and his pass blocking is actually a lot more clean. Giving up 2 sacks, every once in a while, they run a stunt or they get a blitz and you get called up for the sack. So I don't know that I think, one of them was definitely on him. I remember seeing it, but the other one I don't remember necessarily what had happened, but I think I like him more as a pass blocker personally. So,
Yeah, and I mean having only 6 hurries also, that's just like, hey,
yeah.
nobody's even coming close
Yeah.
uh, with that respect. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on into our next um, set of guys.
All right.
And yeah, so Ariante Ursary, I know it's a guy that you really like out of Minnesota.
Yeah, so with Arion Tertiary, and he's a little older. He's a redshirt senior. Don't have an age. I don't. They just don't like me. I swear. But
Just unknown.
it's okay. Uh, he was the offensive lineman of the year in the Big Ten. He's a third team All American this year, and he is extremely like tested. He had 2,341 snaps this year. He is a nasty run blocker, absolutely nasty. He gets that body lean, constant foot movement. The zone blocking is just, explosive finisher. I really like him, and there's a big jump. So the reason, we didn't have the last two guys on their individual slides, is because there's a massive jump between Arion Tertiary and Ozzy Trapillo. Ozzy's, I said, was, between 70 and 90. We haven't done our rankings yet, so we'll get that. But Arion Tertiary's in the top 40. So that is a massive difference between these two guys. He punches you and he knocks you off your feet. And the closest thing I have for like a reference of that is like really liked Fuaga last year, and he was that guy that I said was the mauler in the run game and could knock you off your feet. Well, this is the similar guy. He's not as athletic, and I think Fuaga was much better as a pass blocker. But I really like Ariane Tertiary. Um, some things I think he might need to sit a year, which is fine if you're getting picked, mid to late second round. He has a extremely high ceiling though. His floor is a little scary, but his ceiling is absolutely incredible. Some cons though, he lacks a little bit of athleticism, and at times he lunges at the waist and where he bends. Um, and if you watch the Penn State versus Minnesota game, you can see what Abdul Carter really is, because this is a legit prospect at offensive tackle, and Abdul Carter is just really good at football. And watch that game against how he responds to certain speed rushers and stuff like that. Don't take that one game as you know, the most important film you watch, though, because I think that there's a lot of really good film that he put on that was against other really solid edge rushers also.
Yeah, and with him, he's got kind of experience on multiple levels, but he did start his final 38 games at left tackle,
Hmm.
and also he was the Big Ten lineman of the year. So that's in a conference that has a ton of linemen that just get churned out every single year. That is definitely a huge accomplishment in that regard. But yeah, he's battle tested, like you said, and he has the experience. And I know he is a year older than most of these guys. I think he's going to be, or whatever he is, he was in
Between
college
tw
for 5 years.
yeah,
So it's 23 to 24. But I mean,
right.
at the end of the day, he's a fringe day one to day two, depending on where we go. I think we had him at the end of our mock 1.0, and who knows how we feel about it the second round once we do another go at it. But yeah, I think schematically, if you put him in the right set, he's going to become really. This is going to seem way too low in retrospect if we look back in a couple of years.
Yeah, we put him in the end of round one because of fit, but I don't that fit is obviously gone. It was Ronnie Stanley re-signed with the Baltimore Ravens, so that their
Hmm.
left tackle is locked up. So I'm not necessarily sure where he'll go. Um, the Raiders wouldn't be mad about getting him. I don't think the Cowboys would be either if he's replacing, Terrence Steele. So there's some options, of course, in the second round that could be cool.
Or you
Um,
can replace Tyler Guyton because I don't like him.
well, he can just put Tyler Guyton at right tackle where he's supposed to
Sure,
be.
sure. Yeah, that
Um,
works too.
okay. And then next up we have we have Josh Connerly,
Uh-huh.
another Big Ten player, first team All Big Ten, third team All American. Both of these guys in the last two were basically the best two offensive linemen in the Big Ten last year. And Josh Connerly just missed out on that Offensive Lineman of the Year award because of Arion Tertiary. But 2-year starter, 1,816 total snaps. That's because they go deep runs into the playoffs. Like they get pretty deep into the playoffs every year. They will continue that, I believe. 10 games without a pressure. 10 games without a single pressure. No sacks after week two. Zero pressures against Penn State. So I'm just saying, like, those are all insane things to say because we just talked about Ariante Ursary, who had serious issues against Abdul Carter. Josh Connerly did a much better job. And one thing that I always like mentioning is just, he was a running back in high school. Like, just the weirdest things, right? But pros, young athlete, got better throughout the year, which I thought was good because last year he definitely rose his stock a ton between last year and this year.
Hmm.
Athletic, fluid with bend, pass pro phenom, pass pro phenom. Uh, First step, quickness, freak speed, and then perfect for outside zone style plays because he is such a good athlete and can move really well. Cons, power is his biggest issue right now, but he is the one of the younger players in the class, and kind of allows defenders to stay on the line of scrimmage and doesn't really displace them in the run game. That's why he would fit an outside zone scheme. Just saying. But yeah, I really liked him this last year, and I think that we will of course have to talk about what Mike Green did to him real quick. Mike Green, in pass pro on one-on-ones during the Senior Bowl, ran him over, and that was just a non-justice because I think he had one of the better weeks of all the offensive linemen, but he gets run over and gets the biggest overall probably viral video of him. So yes, that did happen, but I think that he's still a really good player. I think he's a first rounder. Where he goes in the first round will probably be between 25 and 32, but I think he's a really solid player.
Yeah, and he was a first team All American this year. And obviously, he had a high pedigree because he was a 5-star recruit. He had the
Yeah.
Anthony Munoz Award winner in 2021, which is the best offensive lineman coming out of high school. So he's basically lived up to expectations. And once he got the job in 2023, he just never looked back. Yeah, a lot to like about him, and he just had just all around a fantastic year protecting Dylan Gabriel. So we actually have an age on this one. But yeah,
Thank God.
he's a multi-year starter, battle tested, got all the tools, and yeah, first. I don't know if I would consider him a first round lock because of
No.
how just volatile the end of the first round or chaotic it'll be. But he definitely earned and is warranted if he is selected earlier than expected.
Yeah, I think actually we have ages for the whole top five, which is cool, but that's separate. But I do think that with him, he has some pedigree, but he is a young player that will probably need to learn a little bit. Kansas City's an option though, if they want to go there. Wherever you think, I think that there's a lot of teams in the back half that could be like, we need a tackle. He might be the favorite tackle for pass pro overall. And if your scheme is right, then I would think he would be a good pick.
Mhm.
All right, guys. I know you're all going to be mad.
This is gonna be surprising.
I know you're all going to be mad at me. It's okay. It's okay. Will Campbell is number four, and I mean, I have plenty of reasons. So it's not like I'm not making it up. He is number four. He got the Jacobs Blocking Trophy, which is one of the top two offensive linemen in the SEC. He was a first team All-American at the tackle position. He ran a 4.98 40, I believe. 4.98, I think is Cam can fact check me. But he also had a 1.76 split, which is awesome. Um, big problems. Big problems are the fact that I think he's a guard. I think he lacks length. I think he has some issues with that kind of stuff. I think his arm length is a little troubling to me. Doesn't bend that much. If you've ever watched an LSU game, both of their tackles stand straight up and down. So I think he loses power from that. I actually think he's more inconsistent than most people. I don't necessarily think he had the greatest film especially not in 2024. In 2023, his film is different. He has some of the
Mhm.
best film in 2023. And that's actually part of his pedigree because he did it for 2 years and he was really good for 2 years. But I thought he had some more inconsistencies this year. I don't know that I think he's always polished. And I did not love his film overall. But what I did notice is I think that as a guard, as an interior offensive lineman, even a center, and I know he's 6'6", so maybe center's a little, we're pushing it. But if he plays interior offensive line, I think he's a perennial All-Pro. I think he's an insane player if he plays the interior offensive line. And so I think that is my biggest thing. Some of the pros, he's a great athlete. Shows up when you talk about a sub 540. He's a capable second level blocker, can move up there, get up there quick. Good patience to explosion. So he waits really well on pass block pro, and then when he's finally wait, then he goes and gets after it. Constant foot speed on runs. He might be the best run blocker in the class overall for any
Mhm.
position, and that's basically special. But I don't know that I think he's the same pass blocker that the guys above him are, and maybe not even Josh Connerly. Now, that's pushing it because I think Josh Connerly is good, but I think Will Campbell's in a different tier than him overall. But I think what Will Campbell does is he run blocks and he goes and gets after it. He's nasty. He's a freak. That kind of screams guard to me. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. So I
Yeah,
think he could play guard.
yeah, and him being four, don't treat that as too much disrespect. It's more so just we think he is probably gonna reach his ceiling at another position. And so if you're going to be drafting somebody in the top five, which he's been projected to a lot, or even top 10 as a almost lock for that matter, you need to be playing the position that you're drafted for. So if everybody's going to be drafting him as a left tackle or a right tackle or whatever you want to call him, you know, it might be a little bit of a rough start or a get for him, but he's got all the accolades. He's a three-time All SEC offensive lineman, two-time All First Team, and like you said, was the offensive lineman of the year. But if you're talking to all the guys that are going in the first round range, he had the highest quarterback pressure percentage, highest amount of pressures, hurries. Only guy of those to have more than one sack allowed. So he just didn't wow you like you think he would based on his pedigree. And if you looked at his accolades, you would think that he's just this just guy that won't allow you to touch or even come close to the quarterback that you're trying to get.
Right.
But it happens a little more than you think. But we still like him a lot. And he'll be a next level contributor no matter what. But we want to see him kicked inside to reach his true ceiling.
And I've seen a lot of people arguing like, "Oh, but his tape's so good. Why would you want to move him to guard? Like, what's the point if his tape was so good?" And I'm like, I don't know that his tape was that good at tackle. I think it was good. I don't know it was amazing by any
Mhm.
means. Um, Something else I want to say is like you were mentioning, this is his worst season he's had in the last three. So why was there a step back? I don't know. Maybe it was the Gary Nussmeier situation, but I'm just, kind of speculating on the fact that I think if he has an immobile quarterback, it's better for him to be not at tackle, not
Mhm.
playing against NFL tackles. And I think that if he plays tackle off the rip, you will feel like you did not get like Mekhi Becton. Mekhi Becton kicks into guard this last year for the Eagles, has an amazing season comparatively to all the other seasons he's played. Finally hits not his ceiling, but finally hits like or his draft stock, I guess, but does well. And all it took was them deciding, hey, he's probably not athletic enough to block on the outside. Well, and or has shorter arms. Well, Will Campbell kind of fits that same build. I just wish, teams would do it a little earlier than they do sometimes.
Mhm.
Next up, the Outland Trophy winner, and also in the SEC, also won the Jacobs Blocking Trophy, was a first team All American next to Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks. Kelvin Banks is a guy that, you know, well, let's just say Texas has he's played so many snaps first off for Texas. I mean, just an insane amount of snaps. I mean, in the last 3 years alone, he's 2,774 snaps. 857 was the lowest. I don't even know. Has he
Mm.
ever sat out a game? Like ever?
I know he got banged up towards the end of the season, but I don't remember or recall if he sat out towards the end to
Right.
prep for the playoff. But yeah, that other than that, he's been as durable as can be.
Yeah, and I think it's weird. Most people are also going to probably be like, why is he at three? I thought he'd be higher, considering the fact that there's not that many tackles left. Well, I also think he's a guard, but I think he's actually a better tackle prospect when it comes down to it. He had the 89.8 pass blocking grade, which is, I think, the highest basically out of everybody that played in the SEC for sure, and like those big conferences is what I mean. Um, he um, he's got a really good anchor and wide base, great patience, good lean in the run game, good blocker in space. The issues are, I think he has some issues with speed rushers because replacing arms after SWAT, he doesn't really have that speed to get back on. I think he looks and feels a little bit shorter because he's so wide, but at the same time, and I want to preface this. I don't want to move everybody into guard. That's not really what I'm saying. But like sometimes there's just guys that I think fit better at guard. I didn't really say that very much last year. Last year I was like, these are all tackles. It just happens to be two of the guys that I think are really good at football should play guard because that's where they're going to hit their ceiling. And so with him, he just may better he may be suited better for guard. Um, and it could cause more issues for it feels like he has shorter arms, and he has some inconsistencies on drive blocks, but I just think really he feels like a guard to me. And I don't know if you think the same because you did watch Texas so much, but I think you could probably say either position he'd be good at.
Hmm.
I don't know where you feel his ceiling is though.
It's hard to say, but I mean, he's got almost as much, if not more. I don't have the numbers in front of me in terms of overall snap counts for each person, but just as much experience as you can ask for. And a lot of people, with Texas first year in SEC, oh, now you got to take some real, front fours and have to deal with that. And he didn't really miss a step. He was still All American and did everything he needed to.
Right.
And he's young. He's got hand size. He's got just arm length isn't as great, but guess what? Will Campbell's is even worse.
Yeah.
The thing is that's interesting when you're looking at mocks at the very moment is that a lot of people are dropping him much further down for the same issues that Will Campbell has, yet Will Campbell is staying the same spot essentially. So it's
Hmm.
kind of a little interesting in that regard. I know you mentioned the other day of how it's just like, okay, we're being a little too disrespectful of him because we've seen a lot of I mean, he was a fringe top 10 pick to start the offseason, and all of a sudden most mocks have him in the 20s.
And he
Uh,
was an outlet trophy winner, and like
yeah,
it wasn't
and,
like he
and
played bad.
yeah, and it's not like there's offensive lineman shortage or a lack of teams that have a need or something. There's just a bunch of guys that they have projected over him, and I just think he's just one of the safest can be that's going to be starting for a decade.
Hmm.
Doesn't matter the position because it'll just work out. I just don't know if he's going to be the like an all pro consistently or just become just for sure the best in the class yet because of there are a lot of upside guys, but there's a lot of people that have much lower floors than he does.
Oh yeah, absolutely, completely agree with that. Okay, let's go to the number two guy.
It's our riser right here.
Oh yeah, and we were early. Let's
Oh
just
yeah,
be
we
very
were.
honest. We were very early. He's a 2 year start, 2.5 year starter at right tackle. Not a full 3 year starter, but Armand Mimbu out of Missouri. He's he's the most pro ready and he's young,
Mhm.
21.3 years old. He's one of the most pro ready football players in this class. It's just insane to me to see. 8 pressures on the year, 2.2% quarterback, 2.0% quarterback pressure rate, mid 80s on both his run and pass grades. Like he's just really good at everything, and there's very few cons. So pros, um, he's the natural athleticism guy. Like his lateral quickness is in very special lateral quickness. He could play in basically any scheme, but if he's pulling, if he's running zone, outside zone, like he's solid. Flexibility, and I wrote literally every single joint because he is flexible in every possible way. Coordination and balance. He's explosive with his hands. He looks like a tight end at offensive tackle to me. Like when he is moving down
Mhm.
the field, he looks like a tight end at offensive tackle. Outside zone or pulling, like I said, and then he has a good, really good anchor. He's got okay. I don't just look at this, I promise, guys. But he's got this massive butt and like lower body like physique that when he gets like pushed by a rusher, he just stifles them. He doesn't move. He just like I'm swole. You cannot get through me. Stop.
Right.
Type of thing. I'm like, how are you so young and so big? Because like 6'4", 32 is crazy. His athleticism precedes him. And I don't remember what his RAS score was off the top of my head. Do you
Very,
remember
very
his?
high.
Yeah, it was
Not top of my head, but it was
insane,
historically great.
insane, and that's why I actually think he's a tackle. I don't think he's a guard. A lot of people want to move into guard because he's 6'4". I think he's a tackle because he has that athleticism to play tackle, and I think his arm length is. I mean, his arm length is better than Will Campbell. It's the same as Calvin Banks. So if you want to make that argument, if he goes to guard, he's going to be good too. I'm not saying that, but I think he's actually got the upside at tackle. Um, the one thing, there's a couple cons. He looks like he doesn't care at times. Like he is okay with just doing his job, getting in the way, and then being done, which annoys me a little bit when I watch. But at the same time, I'm like, you did everything you were supposed to do. It's just then all of a sudden you had bad body movement, and I'm a little annoyed. But like, really, you didn't do anything wrong on the play necessarily. And I don't know that he's like the nastiest player. And I told you all earlier, you check that box. That's important. Well, at the same time, if you're just really good at what you do and you don't allow any pressures and you don't, mess up at all, like I can't be mad at you for not being nasty if you're just going to be really good. Also, like, that's not necessarily fair either. So, that's the problem. And then I think the typical NFL height is probably one thing that most people will knock him for. I don't think he if he was 2 inches taller, we'd be talking about him as a lot like that 2 inches would change everything in people's perspective, and I just don't think it should. So
Right.
that's Armand Mimbu.
Yeah, and just he does it all and does it all well. He was one of two people in the entire country to have a pass block and run block grade per PFF above an 80, and he was 86.6 and 87.7 respectively in pass block and run block grade. So there's nobody really that had that kind of level of grade other than Wyatt Millum, who's in this class, but interior line is where people are projecting him. But yeah, he did wonders for himself at the combine, made himself millions of dollars, and there's even talk of him, jumping into the top 10 and possibly even usurping like Will Campbell as the first offensive lineman on the off the board, which is how crazy it's become. I will say everything has come in his regard at purely right tackle. He's the only one in our top 10 that does not have college experience at left tackle, but at the end of the day, we've seen more and more right tackles become prevalent and taken high and panning out. So it's not like the old spiel of just you can only take a left tackle in the top 10. Everything else has to come outside. He's athletic. He's got the stats to back it up. I don't know how he was a second team all SEC with just 0 sacks and 0 quarterback hits, but
Well,
somehow was. So
Kelvin Banks and Will Campbell,
yeah,
name value wise,
I guess so.
automatically are above
Yeah,
him.
but at the end of the day, start of the draft process, he wasn't even getting a lot of love in the first round, and we were higher on him. And then all of a sudden, now he is a top 13 floor type of pick. So it'll be interesting to see how high he does go. But yeah, somebody that we really really love, and we were early on. If you want to go check the tape.
Yeah, I mean, we are before the combine, we released our top 50, and he was 11, I believe. 11?
Mhm.
Yeah. No, 12. He was 12. I'm sorry. So yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. He's actually higher. He's going to be higher now that he did do that. Even for us, he's going to be higher because of his scores at the combine. But everybody else is now on board with us. But there's still one guy left. One
Yeah,
guy.
there is.
And talk about projection, right? So Josh Simmons is I just love Josh Simmons and his style of play and everything he brings to the table. He was the GTD preseason dark horse. He was an honorable mention All Big Ten. Well, I think only playing 2 games in the Big Ten. That's pretty cool. He's legit. He is legit as a pass blocker. He is one pressure through 6 games, and I know everybody wants to make the case. Oh, well, he didn't play anybody. He didn't play anybody. Well, when you're that dominant, I've heard so many scouts say he had the best film through 6 games of anybody. And then they're like, but he's not even a first round grid or not even top 32 on their big board. And I'm like,
Insane.
something has to, like, when you say something, it should probably meet up with what you're doing, right? Well, we have him in the top 10, obviously, in the first big board. And I know he has a season-ending injury, but there's really, I mean, he's supposed to perform at his pro day. So that means that he's back to at least good health. He's an athletic freak, fluid mover, gets to the second level, smooth against stunts, constant foot movement on run plays, great at centering defenders and getting both hands on them. So he doesn't just like try to do the one hand. I mean, he actually finds a way to get his hands in the middle of defenders and really, get after them. Of course, he has the knee injury. Whatever. Who cares? Like at the end of the day, we have seen players that have had injuries in the past and then them not working out. And I'm one of those people that'll be honest. Like I liked Caleb Farley. Caleb Farley had a torn ACL coming out of his senior year, and he did not pan out. And I think a little bit has to do with his injury and not coming back and never like really recovering. Now you have a guy like Jonathan Brooks this last year. Like there are injuries out there that really hinder people, but I'm gonna bet on the talent and I'm gonna believe that this injury is not as bad and that if he does perform at his pro day, people are gonna be sending him up the boards because he should be higher, and we're just gonna be early.
Yeah, it's kind of very contradictory because I mean he like for example Daniel Jeremiah, who we compare and contrast to often, has him all the way down at 35, and he dropped him even further down, even though there was nothing that came out or anything negative about him. But he went to San Diego State, played right tackle, was awesome there, and then transferred to Ohio State and immediately won the left tackle job before the season even started. And like you said, was having a uh, just basically tackle number one overall kind of year before his injury. So he had one freak injury and didn't allow anything before that. Hasn't had an injury history before that, and all of a sudden just is dropping into fringe second round pick. That doesn't compute to me. You like the injury can't be an end all be all for somebody as talented as he is. Maybe that'll cost him a couple of draft spots, but putting him as like the fifth offensive lineman off the board just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense when he has experience on both sides. He was productive. He just has the one injury that unfortunately ended his season early.
Yeah, I could understand if people are like, he's a mid first rounder. He's like in the like low 20s, late teens, basically. Like I'd be cool with that because I'm like, okay, well, if you're gonna like really put stock into the injury, That's probably where he should be. That would be behind Kelvin Banks. That would be behind Mimbu and Will Campbell. But like just dropping him to like 35 and saying Josh Connerly's ahead of him and stuff like that doesn't make any sense to me. Like that's where like there needs to be a line drawn in the sand somewhere. Basically, is how I feel about it.
Exactly. Like if he hypothetically did not tear his patellar tendon and
That's right. Yeah.
he played the entire season, and they were national champions and all that stuff, and they you would have heard announcers every single week talking about his name and how he's just moving people out of the way, pancaking them, not letting them get to the quarterback. He would be consensus the pick to New England
Yeah.
in every mock that we
Agreed.
do. But because of his injury, that's why he's dipped a little bit. And if we do our what would we do mock, he's going to be very different compared to other because we know he's going to be a great left tackle. It's just which team is going to pounce on him first, and he's going to be very different in terms of that. But yeah, if he's going to be in the back end of the first round, it's going to be one of our favorite picks for whoever is able to scoop him up. Somebody like Houston, who basically just traded away all of their offensive linemen, is a spot that makes a ton of sense. Just for an example.
Yeah, absolutely, completely agree with that. Let's talk about the rankings between years. Last year we did a ton of rankings for this position. I mean, there have been some really good tackles in the last two classes. And so if you look up there, Joe Alt holds on to that first spot. Joe Alt is very, very special player when it comes down to it. And obviously he showed that this year, moving from left tackle to right tackle, didn't skip a beat, just freak. But our first guy, Josh Simmons, is next up, and then go back to 2024, Talise Fuaga, Membu. But you can see that like the top 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, everybody is just switching between 2025 and 2024 for the most part, all the way down. So that's good to see. That shows that there's a lot of talent in both of these classes because that was a good offensive tackle class last year. It's good
Mhm.
again.
Yeah, and this is the first. If you've kept up, we've already released our quarterback, running back, receiver rankings, and then I
Right.
believe our tight end's already out. If you want to go check that out as well, this is the first ranking between the years that it's actually jumbled
Yeah.
because everything else is just like, hey, it was all 2024, then it was all 2025, or vice versa, or there's like tight end where there's one guy and then it's everybody from the other class and the other. But yeah, after Joe Alt, who's pretty, if anybody else did this exercise, would be the consensus tackle one.
Hmm.
2 through 7, even 8 or 9 is so close
Yeah.
between everybody, which is fun to see because that just shows all the talent and the depth in each of these last two drafts. And a lot of them have experience and flexibility on both sides coming out, which is why we liked him. There's not many that we were just very, very low. I remember us being lower on JC Latham, but it's not like we were like he shouldn't be a first rounder. But we weren't on board with him going 7 to the Titans. That
Right.
is just
Yeah.
kind of one of those
He
things.
was a
So
fringe guy to us versus like
exactly.
top first offensive second offensive tackle of the board. T-
Right. Yeah.
Tyler
So
Guyton's the same way.
yeah, it's a whole lot of fun to see where these guys go. Kind of similar to what I said about the running back position. I just kind of want to see where these guys land, and then we rank them again just to see how we view them going forward. Because some of these guys might land in spots that we're just like, I don't love the fit.
Right.
Like you said, Ariante Ursary snuck into the first round because we would love him even more if he went to Baltimore. Obviously, that's probably no longer on the board because they did re-sign Ronnie Stanley.
Right.
But just kind of those types of situations make it really, really interesting. And then if like Will Campbell hypothetically went to a team and it was like, no, he's going to be a left tackle, that's going to kind of justify our rankings a little bit. Versus if he fell all the way to like 11 with the 49ers and we're like, no, we need a guard. So
He's Aaron
he's going to
Banks
kick inside.
replacement.
And then,
Yeah.
exactly. And we're going to love it even more. Plus, he goes to San Fran, which is just very, interior lineman friendly with the way they run things. So just those kinds of things are really fun to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like this list is still changing. I mean, I like Arianta Ursary is a guy that, is probably in that like 36 range for us, 37, 38. But he might end up ahead of Troy Fatanu or Tyler
Mhm.
Guyton at the end of this all. So we'll see. We don't really. It's not set in stone necessarily, but it's a really good place to be in the middle of March, and talking about all this stuff. So I mean, this is a very exciting position, and it's always a position. I actually, and I will say, I'm better at certain positions than I am at others. this is one of my better positions when I'm actually just talking about scouting overall. Like I played linebacker. I watched offensive linemen a lot. That's just how it kind of works out. Like I honestly, I don't know that I'm the best scout ever at linebacker, but when I talk about just like watching these offensive linemen, I mean, I literally watch so much film on offensive linemen all the time. Like that's kind of what I'm good at, you know? And so I've been better at this position over like say cornerback
Hmm.
in my career. So hopefully we'll continue that. But
Yeah, I mean,
it's a good group.
again, it's you're never going to bat 1,000 with doing rankings or tiers like this, but
Right.
at the end of the day, you have a pretty good track record, not only representing GTD's rankings and all that stuff, but yeah, like you said, offensive lineman is something that you really kind of thrive with. And again, I wish we did this year. Like we should have been doing this in college when we were doing mocks and
Right, of
just
course.
texting back and forth, because you just there were so many good thoughts and hits that you had that just are lost in translation because we don't have it on film and stuff like that. So a whole lot of fun stuff though. We appreciate you guys tuning in. That wraps up our offensive tackle rankings. Please leave a like and a comment on what you think. Obviously there's a couple polarizing positions that we did take for our rankings, and we want to, if we are wrong, we want to hear from your perspective of why we're wrong and just what you expect going forward for any of these guys. And then I'll obviously subscribe if you haven't already. We're on the road to 250, getting really close. So we're basically, this week is 5 weeks away from the draft. I think it's 38 days as of this recording. We're going to be live streaming during the draft, the first round, and it's going to be a whole lot of fun to talk about. We did a great job covering it last year, and I expect to even be better this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can't wait to hear about Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks and all these guys in the comments section. I'm sure we're gonna get a little bit of attacked, but I don't. I mean, it is what it is. Like you get to watch the film. We all watch the film. We all think differently, and that's okay. We don't have to think the same. It just depends on where they go and what they can do in the NFL. But
Hmm.
we appreciate you, like Cam said, and hopefully you will like and subscribe and come hang out with us for the rest of these videos and then into the draft season and then all the way around football season and back. So we appreciate it, and we'll see you on the next one.
Later, guys.